when it comes to you getting into open source, even before it was called open source, was that Unix standardization activity where you kind of learned about free software, the licenses, and all this collaborative efforts of working on software, like interconnected between companies, individuals, anyone interested in that kind of
Absolutely.
technology?
Like it was, if you went to a Usenix conference, and that was back in a period of history where there was two, an East Coast and a West Coast America Usenix conference every year. And that they were just starting to ramp up the system administration conference as well. This was this period of growth from, you know, Unix being an interesting workstation to Unix being server workloads, and the early web and the rise of that period of the early internet. And it was Larry Wall talking about this thing called Perl that he'd invented as a language that made, and the fun of Perl was, you have to remember, creating processes on a machine was expensive back then, and some of the very complex things that people would do with, shell scripts. The point of Perl was to be able to do it in a single process kind of thing, and not have to spin up more processes than you had, slots in the process table. But that was the talk. Larry was standing there introducing the world to Perl at a Usenix conference. And, all of the research that was ongoing coming out of, around the BSD variants of Unix from uh, the Berkeley CSRG, the folks from Bell Labs were standing there, introducing you to the toys that were their reality for this is version control. This is what make looks like. And some of the and all of these tools, they were all there as source code. Um, we were into the early internet. If you lived in that Unix community, you probably had an email address. You probably knew how to telnet between machines. You knew what FTP was to move files around. Yeah, this is, and as we came into the early 90s, kind of pre-web, there was, what was it? Ways, wide area information services kind of thing. There was just all of these ways of kind of passing information around and trickling it around an early internet. And it was normal. But if you go back prior to that, I mean, I spent the 80s working on DEC equipment. RSX was the operating system into VMS. And in that community, which was DEC crossed IBM's market caps somewhere in the 80s to become the largest computer manufacturer of the day. But there was something called the DEC Users Society, DECUS. You'd go to a DECUS meetup, and the big conference once a year, for the outrageous sum of $75 for the cost of media and somebody's time, you would get a tape full of software. And some of it was binaries, some of it was source code that you had to build yourself. This was this early period, like some of it had, very strict copyright license on it because, we knew it had copyright. Some of it was like you had developers trying to place it in the public domain, which means something different in different localities around the world. But there was just this large sharing community where, of course, you spend your $75 to get a mag tape full of software. It's with the internet, our packet size just changed, and we weren't on mag tape sized packets and sneakernet at conferences anymore. But so that sharing thing has always been around. If you even go back earlier, IBM's conference was oddly enough called Share. That Share goes all the way back to the 50s. So we barely had computers and software, and IBM, as the preeminent early manufacturer of equipment, was already creating a conference environment where software developers were sharing software. So it's just been this long arc, and I was just lucky to kind of hook it at DECUS and then hook it properly in this new internet support. And a lot of creation of the early internet, again, the folks creating TCP/IP and such, Yes, they were doing that in the IETF as a standards organization, but they were coming and talking about it at Usenix conferences. So again, there was that huge overlap in the 90s of just this early internet, the standards folks, the early implementations of the network, and all of the software that we could share on top of it. It was exciting times.